When my father handed my $2.8 million inheritance check to my sister Delphine right in front of me, claiming she deserved it more because I was just a waitress who would waste it, he had no idea I was already sitting on a $15 million cryptocurrency empire that I'd built in complete secrecy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Hello everyone, before we dive into today's absolutely mind-blowing story, I need your help with something important. We've been noticing that our channel hasn't been getting the traction it deserves, and honestly, subscribing is one of the most powerful ways you can support us. It's completely free, takes literally 2 seconds, and it helps us continue creating these incredible real-life stories that you love so much. Your support genuinely means the world to us and helps keep this channel growing strong. So please, if you enjoy these stories, hit that subscribe button and let's keep building this amazing community together. Thank you so much, and now let's get into this absolutely wild story. I'm using a throwaway account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some specific details to protect everyone's identity, but trust me, every shocking moment of this story is completely true. My name is Seraphina, I'm 32 years old, and I desperately need to get this off my chest because what happened to my family has left me absolutely speechless. You know those families where there's always been a clear favorite child, and no matter what you do, you'll never measure up to your golden sibling? Well, welcome to my entire existence. My story takes place in the beautiful but pretentious town of Willowbrook Heights, where old money families like ours have been living for generations, and appearances matter more than actual character. Growing up in the Ashworth family meant living under very specific expectations. My father, Theodore Ashworth, was a prominent real estate developer who built half the luxury homes in our county. My mother, Cordelia, came from old textile money and spent most of her time organizing charity galas for the country club. They were the kind of people who measured success by how impressive you sounded at dinner parties, and let me tell you, being a creative, independent thinker was not exactly what they had in mind for their daughters. Then there was Delphine, my younger sister by 3 years. From the moment she could walk, Delphine was everything our parents wanted in a daughter. She was classically beautiful, charming in that fake socialite way, and most importantly, she followed every single rule and expectation they set for her. Private school valedictorian, debutante ball queen, married her college sweetheart who happened to be from another wealthy family, and produced 2 perfect grandchildren right on schedule. Delphine was living the exact life our parents had always dreamed of, and they never let me forget it. Meanwhile, there was me. I was always the black sheep, the daughter who asked too many questions and refused to fit into their perfect little mold. While Delphine was winning beauty pageants, I was reading philosophy books and teaching myself computer programming. While she was dating the quarterback, I was working part-time jobs to save money for things I actually cared about. And while she was planning her dream wedding to Mr. Perfect, I was supposedly throwing my life away by working as a waitress at Café Luna downtown instead of pursuing what they called a respectable career. Here's the thing about wealthy families that most people don't understand: money comes with strings attached, and those strings can strangle you if you're not careful. Every family dinner was a reminder of how I was disappointing them. Every holiday gathering included passive-aggressive comments about when I was going to get serious about my future. Every phone call from my mother included updates about Delphine's latest achievements, followed by concerned questions about whether I was still serving tables. The breaking point came 6 months ago when my grandfather, Augustus Ashworth, passed away at the age of 89. Grandpa Gus was the only family member who ever truly understood me. He was a self-made man who built his fortune from nothing, and he always told me that real success comes from following your own path, not the path others choose for you. He was the one person in my family who never judged me for being different, and honestly, losing him felt like losing my only ally in a house full of people who didn't understand me. What I didn't expect was that Grandpa Gus had left me a substantial inheritance. We're talking $2.8 million, which he had specifically designated for me in his will. According to his lawyer, he wanted me to have the freedom to pursue my dreams without being dependent on anyone else's approval. It was his way of giving me the independence he knew I'd always wanted. But here's where the story takes its first shocking turn. When the lawyer called our family meeting to discuss the inheritance, I thought it would be a straightforward process. I imagined my parents might be surprised by Grandpa's decision, but I figured they'd respect his wishes. After all, this was his money to distribute however he saw fit. I could never have predicted what actually happened in that lawyer's office, or how that single moment would expose the true nature of my family and set off a chain of events that would change everything forever. What happened next revealed not only how my family really felt about me, but also forced me to reveal a secret that would turn their entire world upside down. But before I tell you about that life-changing moment, I need you to understand the full scope of what was really going on behind the scenes, because the inheritance drama was just the beginning of a much bigger and more shocking story. Before I dive into the absolute chaos that unfolded in that lawyer's office, I need to establish some credibility here and give you the full context of what my life was really like leading up to this moment. Trust me, the details matter because they make what happens later even more shocking. First off, I want to be completely transparent with you all. I'm sharing this story on a throwaway Reddit account because, honestly, my family would lose their minds if they knew I was putting this out there. I've changed all the names, locations, and some specific details to protect everyone's privacy, but I swear on everything I hold dear that the core of this story is absolutely true. Every shocking moment, every betrayal, every jaw-dropping revelation actually happened exactly as I'm telling you. My name for this story is Seraphina, and I'm 32 years old. I live in what I'm calling Willowbrook Heights, which is one of those affluent suburban communities where everyone knows everyone's business, and family reputation is everything. Think perfectly manicured lawns, country club memberships, and the kind of place where people judge you based on what car you drive and which private school your kids attend. It's beautiful on the surface, but underneath all that perfection, there's a lot of ugly truth about how these families really operate. The Ashworth family, my family, has been part of Willowbrook Heights' social elite for 3 generations. My grandfather, Augustus Ashworth, started with nothing and built a construction empire that eventually became one of the most successful real estate development companies in our region. By the time my father Theodore took over, we weren't just wealthy, we were old money wealthy, which comes with its own set of ridiculous expectations and social rules. Now, I need you to understand something about my family dynamics because it's crucial to understanding why what happened was so devastating. My parents, Theodore and Cordelia, aren't necessarily bad people, but they're definitely products of their environment. They cared deeply about social status, family reputation, and maintaining appearances. In their world, success is measured by very specific markers: prestigious education, respectable career, advantageous marriage, and producing the next generation to carry on the family legacy. My sister Delphine mastered this game from day one. She's 29 years old, graduated summa cum laude from Pemberton University with a degree in art history, married her college boyfriend Nathaniel Wellington from another prominent family, and they have 2 adorable children, Beatrice and Edmund. Delphine lives in a stunning colonial house just 10 minutes from our parents, works part-time at an art gallery downtown, and basically embodies everything my parents ever wanted in a daughter. She's their success story, their proof that they raised their children right. Then there's me, and honestly, I've been a disappointment since I was old enough to have opinions. I went to the same prestigious prep school as Delphine, Crescent Academy, but instead of following the expected path to an elite university, I chose to attend Riverside Community College to study computer science and digital media. My parents were mortified. In their social circle, community college was where other people's children went, not Ashworth children. After graduating with my associate degree, I made what my family considered another catastrophic life choice. I started working as a waitress at Café Luna, a small independent coffee shop in downtown Millbrook. Now, before you think I was just being rebellious, let me explain why this job was actually perfect for me. Café Luna had an incredibly flexible schedule, which meant I could work morning and afternoon shifts while having my evenings completely free. The owners, Jake and Miranda Rossetti, were amazing people who treated their employees like family, and honestly, it was the first workplace where I felt genuinely appreciated. But here's what my family never understood, and what becomes crucial to this story. I wasn't just serving coffee and sandwiches during those years. I was using my free time to pursue something that would eventually change my life in ways they could never imagine. However, I'm getting ahead of myself because you need to understand the family dynamic first. Every family gathering was an exercise in subtle humiliation. My parents would introduce Delphine as our daughter who works at the prestigious Whitmore Art Gallery, and me as our other daughter who's still figuring things out. At Christmas dinners, they'd spend 20 minutes discussing Delphine's latest gallery exhibition or her children's achievements at their private school, then turn to me and ask if I was still at that little coffee shop. The worst part wasn't even the direct criticism. It was the constant, suffocating pity. My mother would slip me grocery store gift cards, just to help out a little, and my father would occasionally mention job openings at his company or connections he had at more respectable establishments. They genuinely believed they were helping their struggling daughter who had somehow lost her way in life. What made this even more frustrating was that I actually loved my life. I loved the independence, the freedom to pursue my own interests, and the authentic relationships I was building outside of Willowbrook Heights' artificial social bubble. But try explaining that to parents who measure success by annual salary and social status. This context is absolutely essential because it explains why what happened with my inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about years of accumulated disappointment, misunderstanding, and my family's complete inability to see me as anything other than their failure story. Now that you understand the family dynamics and social pressures involved, I can tell you about the phone call that changed everything. The phone call that would change everything came on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. I was getting ready for my opening shift at Cafe Luna when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Miss Ashworth? This is Harrison Blackwell from Blackwell, Morrison and Associates. I'm calling regarding your grandfather's estate. Could you please come to our office today for an important meeting regarding his will? My heart stopped. Even though Grandpa Gus had passed away 6 months earlier, the family had been told that his estate was still being processed through probate court. We'd attended the funeral, of course, but there had been no mention of any inheritance or will reading. In fact, my parents had specifically told me that Grandpa's assets would likely be tied up in legal proceedings for years because of the complexity of his business holdings. I'm sorry, but I think you might have the wrong person, I said, genuinely confused. My family was told that my grandfather's estate wouldn't be settled for quite some time. Mr. Blackwell's voice was gentle but firm. Miss Ashworth, I can assure you that you're exactly the person I need to speak with. Your grandfather left very specific instructions regarding a private bequest to you, separate from the main estate proceedings. Could you be here by 2 p.m. today? It's quite important, and frankly, it's something that should have been handled months ago. The rest of my morning shift at Cafe Luna passed in a complete blur. Jake noticed I was distracted and kept asking if I was okay, but how could I explain that my dead grandfather apparently had some kind of secret inheritance waiting for me? It felt surreal, like something that happened to other people in movies, not to disappointing waitress daughters in real life. Blackwell, Morrison and Associates occupied an entire floor of the prestigious Meridian Tower downtown, the kind of law firm that represented old money families and handled generational wealth transfers. Walking into their marble-floored lobby in my cafe uniform felt like stepping into a different universe. The receptionist, a perfectly polished woman named Catherine, directed me to Mr. Blackwell's corner office, which had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Harrison Blackwell was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end estate attorney, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and carrying himself with the quiet authority that comes from decades of handling wealthy families' most sensitive matters. He stood when I entered, shook my hand warmly, and gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his massive mahogany desk. Miss Ashworth, thank you for coming on such short notice. I must apologize for the delay in contacting you. Your grandfather's instructions were very specific about timing, and frankly, some complications arose that required careful legal maneuvering to resolve. He opened a thick manila folder and pulled out several documents. Your grandfather, Augustus Ashworth, established a private trust fund specifically for you in 2019, separate from his main estate holdings. He was very particular about keeping this inheritance distinct from the family business assets that would eventually pass to your father. My hands were literally shaking as he slid a document across the desk. The total value of your inheritance is $2,847,000, consisting of diversified stock portfolios, municipal bonds, and a substantial cash component. Your grandfather wanted you to have complete financial independence to pursue whatever path in life would make you truly happy. $2.8 million. I stared at the number on the official document, reading it over and over again because it seemed impossible. This was more money than I had ever imagined having in my entire lifetime. More money than most people in Willowbrook Heights had, honestly. This was life-changing, freedom-creating, dream-enabling money. But then Mr. Blackwell's expression grew more serious. However, there are some complications we need to discuss. Your grandfather's will includes very specific language about how this inheritance should be handled. He wanted your parents to be informed about the bequest, but he also wanted you to have the final decision about timing and implementation. What kind of complications? I asked, though I was starting to get a sinking feeling about where this was headed. Well, your grandfather was concerned about potential family dynamics and specifically requested that the inheritance announcement be made in a controlled environment with legal oversight. He suspected there might be some resistance to his decision to leave such a substantial amount directly to you rather than incorporating it into the general family estate. Translation: Grandpa Gus knew my family well enough to predict they would lose their minds about this. He's arranged for a family meeting here in this office, where I'll present the inheritance documentation and ensure that everything is handled properly according to his wishes. Your parents and sister have been contacted and asked to attend a meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. My stomach dropped. A family meeting meant facing my parents' shock, surprise, and probably their immediate assumptions about how this money should be managed. It meant watching Delphine's perfectly controlled expressions as she processed the fact that her disappointing older sister had just inherited more money than she and Nathaniel had in their joint savings accounts. Mr. Blackwell, is there any way to handle this privately? Maybe just transfer the funds without involving the whole family drama? He shook his head sympathetically. I'm afraid your grandfather's instructions were quite explicit about transparency in this matter. He wanted your family to understand that this was his deliberate choice, not some accident or oversight. He specifically wrote that he hoped this inheritance would help them see you in a different light. Oh, Grandpa Gus. Even from beyond the grave, he was still trying to fight my battles for me. That evening, I sat in my small apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery, staring at the inheritance documents spread across my kitchen table. Tomorrow, everything would change. My family would learn that their disappointing daughter had just become independently wealthy, and honestly, I had no idea how they would react to that news. What I definitely didn't expect was how quickly that family meeting would spiral into something far more dramatic and revealing than anyone could have anticipated. The family meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. on Wednesday, but my parents called an emergency family conference at their house for noon that same day. Apparently, receiving a formal invitation from Grandpa Gus's attorney had sent them into full crisis management mode, and they wanted to strategize before facing whatever surprises awaited us at the law office. I arrived at the Ashworth family estate to find my parents and Delphine already gathered in my father's wood-paneled study, the same room where every major family decision had been made throughout my childhood. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation and barely contained anxiety. My mother was pacing near the fireplace, my father was reviewing documents at his desk, and Delphine sat perfectly composed in her usual chair, though I could see the curiosity burning in her eyes. "Seraphina, thank goodness you're here," my mother said, rushing over to give me one of her brief, perfunctory hugs. "We need to discuss this situation as a family before we walk into that lawyer's office blind." My father looked up from his papers, his expression serious. The attorney's office was very secretive about the nature of this meeting. All they would tell us is that it concerns Augustus's will and involves all immediate family members. Given the timing and the formal nature of the invitation, we can only assume this is about some kind of inheritance distribution. Delphine leaned forward in her chair, her voice carrying that tone of sweet concern she'd perfected over the years. "Sarah, I'm worried about you in all this. You know how Grandpa Gus sometimes made impulsive decisions, especially toward the end. If there's some kind of small inheritance or sentimental bequest for you, you need to be prepared for the family to make collective decisions about how to handle it responsibly." And there it was. The pattern that had defined my entire relationship with my family was already emerging before we even knew what the inheritance involved. The assumption that I couldn't be trusted with important decisions, that my judgment was somehow flawed, and that the family's collective wisdom was necessary to protect me from my own supposedly poor choices. What exactly do you mean by that, Delphine? I asked, though I already knew where this conversation was heading. My mother sat down across from me, her expression shifting into what I privately called her concerned intervention mode. Sweetheart, we're just thinking about your long-term well-being. If Grandpa Gus left you some money, and I'm not saying he did, but if he did, there are smart ways to handle inheritance and less smart ways. Your mother's right, my father added, setting down his papers and giving me his full attention. Inheritance money can be a wonderful opportunity or a terrible burden, depending on how it's managed. Young people often feel overwhelmed by sudden wealth and make decisions they later regret. I was 32 years old, but they were talking to me like I was a college freshman who couldn't be trusted with a credit card. Delphine nodded sympathetically. We've all seen stories about lottery winners who end up bankrupt within 5 years because they didn't have proper financial guidance. Not that this is lottery money, obviously, but the principle is the same. Sudden wealth requires careful planning. Plus, there are tax implications to consider, my father continued, warming to his subject. Capital gains taxes, estate taxes, gift taxes if you want to share with family members. These are complex financial instruments that require professional management. My mother reached over and patted my hand in that condescending way she'd been doing since I was a child. We just want to make sure you don't get taken advantage of by financial advisors or make any hasty decisions. That's what family is for, honey. We look out for each other. The irony was suffocating. Here they were, planning to protect me from an inheritance I hadn't even officially received yet, while having no idea that I'd been successfully managing my own complex financial portfolio for years. They were so convinced of my incompetence that they couldn't imagine I might actually understand money better than they assumed. What if it's not just some small bequest? I asked, genuinely curious about how they'd react to that possibility. What if it's more substantial than you're expecting? My parents exchanged a meaningful look, one of those married couple communications that happens without words. My father cleared his throat. Well, if it were somehow a larger amount, that would actually make proper management even more crucial. Large inheritances can create family tension if they're not handled thoughtfully. Exactly, Delphine chimed in, and I could see her mind already working through the possibilities. If it were significant money, we'd need to think about fairness to the whole family. I mean, we all loved Grandpa Gus equally. We all spent time with him, cared for him, included him in our lives. There it was. The entitlement was already starting to show, even though none of us officially knew what we were walking into that afternoon. My mother nodded emphatically. Family harmony has to be the priority. Your grandfather would never have wanted his generosity to create division between his granddaughters. He always talked about how important family unity was to him. Which is why any major financial decisions should be made collectively, my father concluded. Not just for tax and investment purposes, but to make sure everyone feels respected and included in the process. I sat there listening to them plan my financial future, watching them create justifications for why my inheritance should somehow become a family asset rather than my personal gift from Grandpa Gus. They weren't being malicious, exactly. In their minds, they were genuinely trying to help me navigate something they assumed I couldn't handle alone. But what struck me most was how naturally they fell into this pattern. Without knowing anything concrete about the inheritance, they had already decided I needed supervision, guidance, and family oversight. They had already established that my individual judgment couldn't be trusted and that collective family wisdom should prevail. This wasn't new behavior. This was the same dynamic that had shaped every major decision in my life, from college choices to career paths to living arrangements. The assumption that I was somehow incapable of making good decisions for myself was so deeply ingrained in our family culture that they didn't even recognize they were doing it. As we prepared to leave for the law office, I realized that this inheritance, whatever it turned out to be, was about to become a test of everything I thought I knew about my family's true feelings toward me. The walk into Blackwell, Morrison and Associates felt like a death march. My entire family moved as a unit through the marble lobby, my parents flanking me like protective bodyguards while Delphine walked slightly ahead in her perfectly coordinated business attire. I could feel the nervous energy radiating from all of them, but what struck me most was how they had unconsciously arranged themselves around me, as if I were the family member most likely to embarrass us in this prestigious legal setting. Harrison Blackwell greeted us in the conference room, an intimidating space with floor-to-ceiling law books and a mahogany table that could seat 12 people. He had arranged the inheritance documents in neat stacks at one end of the table, and I noticed he positioned my chair directly across from where my family would be sitting. Something about that arrangement made my stomach clench with anticipation. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Blackwell began, his voice carrying the formal tone of someone who had delivered countless inheritance announcements over his career. "As you know, we're here to discuss Augustus Ashworth's final wishes regarding a private bequest that was separate from his main estate holdings." My father immediately leaned forward, assuming his typical role as family spokesman. "Mr. Blackwell, we appreciate you handling this matter so professionally. We've discussed this as a family, and we want you to know that whatever my father's intentions were, we're committed to ensuring that any inheritance is managed responsibly and in a way that honors his memory." The attorney's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, let me first explain the specifics of what Augustus arranged, and then we can discuss implementation." He opened the first folder and pulled out the official documentation. Augustus established a private trust fund specifically for Seraphina, totaling $2,847,000. The silence in that conference room was deafening. I watched my family's faces as they processed the number, and it was like watching a slow-motion car accident. My mother's mouth actually fell open. My father blinked rapidly, as if he couldn't quite trust what he'd heard. Delphine's perfectly composed expression cracked just slightly, revealing a flash of something that looked suspiciously like shock mixed with envy. "I'm sorry," my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you say $2.8 million? For Seraphina specifically?" "That's correct," Mr. Blackwell confirmed, sliding the documentation across the table toward me. Augustus was very specific about this bequest being for Seraphina's exclusive use. He wanted her to have complete financial independence to pursue whatever path in life would make her genuinely happy. My father recovered first, his business instincts kicking in as he tried to process this unexpected development. "Mr. Blackwell, this is certainly surprising. We had no idea my father was considering such a substantial individual bequest. Can you help us understand his reasoning for this decision?" The attorney consulted another document. Augustus left a personal letter explaining his intentions. "With your permission, Seraphina, I'd like to read the relevant portions aloud." I nodded, not trusting my voice to work properly. Mr. Blackwell cleared his throat and began reading in Grandpa Gus's unmistakable voice, as if he were speaking to us from beyond the grave. "My dearest Seraphina, if you're hearing this letter, then you're finally learning about the gift I've arranged for you. I want you to know that this decision wasn't made lightly or impulsively. I've watched you grow into an independent, thoughtful young woman who has chosen her own path despite considerable family pressure to conform to others' expectations." My mother made a small sound of protest, but Mr. Blackwell continued reading. "I've observed how your family, with the best of intentions, has consistently underestimated your intelligence, your capabilities, and your judgment. They see your choices as failures rather than recognizing them as evidence of your strong character and independent spirit. This inheritance is my way of ensuring that you have the freedom to continue making choices based on your own values rather than financial necessity or family approval." Delphine's face had gone completely white. My father was staring at the table, clearly struggling with the implications of his own father's words about their family dynamics. I specifically chose to make this a private bequest because I suspected that involving the family in this decision would result in well-meaning attempts to manage or redirect these funds in ways that would ultimately serve their comfort rather than your independence. "This money is yours alone, Seraphina. Use it wisely, but more importantly, use it in ways that bring you genuine fulfillment." The attorney finished reading and set the letter aside. Augustus also included specific legal language ensuring that this inheritance cannot be contested, redirected, or managed by anyone other than Seraphina herself. My father was the first to break the stunned silence. "Mr. Blackwell, while we certainly respect my father's wishes, I think we need to have a serious family discussion about the most responsible way to handle this situation. Seraphina is young, and frankly, she doesn't have experience managing substantial assets. And there it was. Even faced with Grandpa Gus's explicit statement about their tendency to underestimate me, even after hearing his concerns about family interference, my father's immediate instinct was to assume control over my inheritance. "Dad," I said quietly, "I'm 32 years old. I'm not a child who needs financial supervision." My mother jumped in, her voice taking on that familiar tone of loving concern that had always made me feel like I was being suffocated by good intentions. "Honey, nobody's questioning your maturity. But this is an enormous amount of money, and there are so many ways that inexperience with wealth can lead to problems. Investment mistakes, tax implications, people who might try to take advantage of you." Delphine finally found her voice, and when she spoke, I could hear the carefully controlled emotion beneath her words. "Sarah, I think what they're trying to say is that this kind of windfall can be overwhelming. Maybe we should all sit down with a financial advisor together, as a family, and make sure you have proper guidance." "Exactly," my father said, clearly relieved that Delphine was supporting the family's position. "This isn't about control, Seraphina. This is about making sure you don't make any decisions you might regret later. Your grandfather wanted you to be happy, and financial security is about smart long-term planning, not immediate gratification." I looked around the table at my family's faces, seeing the same expressions I'd been seeing my entire life. Concern, yes, but also that fundamental assumption that I couldn't be trusted to make important decisions without their guidance. They had just learned that their father and grandfather had left me more money than any of them had ever possessed at one time, and their immediate reaction was to figure out how to manage that money for me. The thing that hurt most was how predictable this response was. Grandpa Gus had literally anticipated this exact scenario in his letter, and yet here they were, proving his point about their inability to see me as a capable adult. What they didn't know was that this inheritance conversation was about to take a turn that would shock them far more than learning about my $2.8 million windfall. Looking at my family's expectant faces around that conference table, I realized this was the perfect moment to share something that had been shaping my life for the past 8 years. While they were busy planning how to manage my inheritance, they had no idea that I'd already been successfully managing something far more complex and valuable than anything they could imagine. "You know what?" I said, setting down the inheritance documents and looking directly at my father. "You're absolutely right that this is a lot of money to handle responsibly. And you're right that inexperience with wealth can lead to serious problems. But before we start making plans for financial advisors and family oversight, there's something I need to tell you about my actual financial experience." Mr. Blackwell seemed to sense that the family dynamics were about to shift dramatically. He quietly gathered his documents and moved to the far end of the conference room, giving us space while remaining available if needed. "What do you mean, your financial experience?" Delphine asked, and I could hear a note of condescension in her voice. "Sarah, balancing a checking account on a waitress salary isn't exactly the same as managing investment portfolios." I pulled out my phone and opened the portfolio management app that I checked multiple times every day. The screen showed real-time updates of my cryptocurrency holdings, stock investments, and various digital asset positions. With a few taps, I navigated to my main dashboard and turned the phone around so my family could see the screen clearly. "Actually, Delphine, I've been managing a portfolio worth about $15 million for the past 4 years." The silence that followed was even more profound than when Mr. Blackwell had announced my inheritance. My mother actually leaned forward and squinted at my phone screen, as if she couldn't trust what she was seeing. "Seraphina," my father said slowly, "what exactly are we looking at here?" "This is my cryptocurrency and digital asset portfolio," I explained, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "I started investing in Bitcoin back in 2016 when it was still under $1,000. I used my tips from Cafe Luna to make small, consistent purchases every week. When Ethereum launched, I got in early on that too." My mother's face had gone completely pale. "You're saying you have $15 million in Bitcoin?" "Bitcoin, Ethereum, and about 30 other digital assets, plus traditional stock investments and some real estate crowdfunding positions. I've been systematically building this portfolio for 8 years while working at the cafe." Delphine grabbed my phone and stared at the screen, her perfectly manicured fingers scrolling through account balances and transaction histories. This can't be real. This has to be some kind of fake app or simulation. It's completely real, I said, taking my phone back and showing them the verification badges from multiple major exchanges. I have accounts with Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, and several other platforms. I can show you my tax returns from the last 3 years if you want proof of my capital gains reporting. My father was gripping the edge of the conference table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Seraphina, are you telling us that while we've been worried about your financial stability, you've been sitting on millions of dollars in cryptocurrency? Not sitting on it, actively managing it. I spend about 2 hours every morning analyzing market trends, reading financial reports, and adjusting my positions based on global economic factors. I have spreadsheets tracking every transaction, detailed records of my cost basis for tax purposes, and a diversification strategy that's protected me through multiple market crashes. The look on Delphine's face was absolutely priceless. Her mouth was opening and closing like she was trying to speak but couldn't find words. Finally, she managed to say, "But you're a waitress. You live above a bakery. You drive that old Honda Civic." "I choose to live modestly because I like my life exactly as it is," I explained. "Mrs. Chen's bakery apartment is perfect for me. It's quiet, affordable, and the location is great for walking to work. My Honda is reliable and paid for. Why would I change a lifestyle that makes me happy just to impress other people?" My mother was shaking her head in bewilderment. "But sweetheart, if you have that kind of money, why are you still working at a coffee shop? Why haven't you told us? Why haven't you bought a house or started a business or done something significant?" This was the question I'd been dreading and anticipating for years. "Because I knew this would happen," I said, gesturing around the conference table. "I knew that the moment you found out about my financial success, it would stop being mine and start becoming a family asset that needed to be discussed, planned, and managed collectively." My father's expression shifted from shock to something that looked suspiciously like hurt. "Are you saying you don't trust your own family? Dad, look at what's happening right now. 30 minutes ago, you found out that Grandpa Gus left me an inheritance, and your immediate reaction was to plan how the family should manage that money for me. You've spent my entire adult life assuming I'm not capable of making good financial decisions, despite never asking about my actual financial knowledge or experience." Delphine was still staring at my phone screen, which was showing real-time updates of my portfolio value fluctuating by thousands of dollars every few minutes. "Sarah, this is insane. Do you realize what you could do with this money? You could buy a mansion, travel the world, start your own business empire. Or I could continue living a life that genuinely makes me happy while building long-term wealth through smart investments," I replied. Not everyone measures success by how much money they spend or how impressive their lifestyle looks to other people. Mr. Blackwell cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should return to the matter of the inheritance documentation. There are some time-sensitive tax considerations we should discuss." But my family wasn't ready to move on from this revelation. My mother was looking at me like she'd never seen me before, and honestly, maybe she hadn't. Maybe none of them had ever really seen me as anything other than their disappointing family member who needed constant guidance and support. "Seraphina," my father said finally, "this changes everything. If you've been this successful with investments, if you understand financial markets this well, then obviously you don't need our guidance with your grandfather's inheritance." It was a start, but I could see the wheels turning in his head as he began processing the implications of having a multimillionaire daughter who had been flying completely under the family radar for nearly a decade. What I couldn't have predicted was how quickly this newfound respect for my financial acumen would transform into something much more problematic and revealing about my family's true priorities. What happened next in that conference room revealed something about my family that I had always suspected but never wanted to confront directly. The shock of learning about my cryptocurrency wealth wore off remarkably quickly, and almost immediately, I could see their minds shifting from, "How is this possible?" to, "How does this benefit us?" My father was the first to recover his composure, and when he spoke, his voice carried that familiar tone of paternal authority mixed with newfound respect. "Seraphina, I have to say, I'm genuinely impressed by what you've accomplished. Building a $15 million portfolio while maintaining complete discretion shows remarkable discipline and financial sophistication. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Thank you, I said cautiously, because I could sense there was a but coming. However, he continued, right on cue, I think we need to have a serious conversation about optimization and growth strategies. Cryptocurrency is notoriously volatile, and while you've clearly done well during the bull markets, there are much more stable investment vehicles that could provide better long-term security. My mother nodded enthusiastically. Your father's absolutely right, sweetheart. Theodore has 40 years of experience in real estate investment and business development. He could help you diversify into more traditional assets that won't keep you awake at night worrying about market crashes. Delphine had been unusually quiet since seeing my portfolio, but now she leaned forward with renewed interest. Sarah, I've actually been thinking about this whole situation, and I wonder if there might be some really exciting family investment opportunities we could explore together. What kind of opportunities? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew where this conversation was heading. Well, Nathaniel and I have been looking at expanding his consulting firm, but we've been limited by capital constraints. With your investment expertise and our business connections, we could potentially create something really significant. My father's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. That's an excellent point, Delphine. Seraphina, you've clearly mastered the art of growing money, but what you're missing is the infrastructure to leverage that wealth into genuine business empire building. Our family has 3 generations of business relationships and community connections that could multiply your returns exponentially. Plus, my mother added, keeping wealth within the family creates so many tax advantages. Estate planning, gift tax exclusions, family limited partnerships. There are legal structures that could benefit everyone while protecting your assets. I sat there listening to them transform my personal financial success into a family business opportunity, and I felt that familiar sinking feeling I'd experienced countless times throughout my childhood. Once again, my individual achievements were being reframed as family assets that needed collective management and strategic deployment. Let me make sure I understand what you're suggesting, I said slowly. You want me to take money from my personal investment portfolio and use it to fund family business ventures? Not fund, invest, my father corrected. This would be legitimate business partnerships with proper legal documentation and profit-sharing agreements. You'd be getting equity stakes in proven business models rather than gambling on cryptocurrency fluctuations. Delphine reached across the table and touched my hand in that sisterly gesture she'd perfected over the years. Sarah, I hope you don't think we're being opportunistic. It's just that we've all struggled with the financial limitations of our individual situations, and now that we know about your success, it seems like there might be ways for all of us to benefit from working together. What kind of financial limitations? I asked, genuinely curious about what they considered struggling. My mother sighed dramatically. Well, your father and I have been talking about downsizing because the house maintenance costs are becoming burdensome. The property taxes alone are astronomical, and we're both approaching retirement age without the kind of nest egg we'd hoped to have. And Nathaniel and I are drowning in private school tuition for Beatrice and Edmund, Delphine added. Plus we're still paying off our own student loans, and the mortgage on our house is much higher than we anticipated when we bought it. My father nodded grimly. The reality is that even with our family's historical wealth, maintaining our lifestyle in Willowbrook Heights has become increasingly challenging. Property values have skyrocketed, but income opportunities haven't kept pace. What struck me about this conversation was how naturally they had transitioned from shock about my hidden wealth to assumptions about how that wealth should be shared with them. There was no discussion about whether I might want to keep my financial independence, no consideration of my own goals and plans for the money, and certainly no acknowledgement that I had earned every dollar through my own research, risk-taking, and disciplined investing. So essentially, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, you're suggesting that I use my cryptocurrency profits to solve the family's various financial challenges? We're suggesting strategic partnerships that would benefit everyone, my father replied. You get diversification and business growth opportunities, while the family gets access to capital that could solve some immediate challenges and create long-term prosperity for all of us. Delphine smiled warmly. Think about it, Sarah. Instead of being the family member who works at a coffee shop, you could be the family member who helped elevate everyone to a new level of financial security. Wouldn't that feel amazing? And there it was. Even my newfound financial success was being reframed as an opportunity for me to finally contribute something valuable to the family dynamic. After years of being seen as the disappointing daughter, I was now being offered the chance to become the family's financial savior. Mr. Blackwell cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this family discussion was taking. Perhaps we should focus on completing the inheritance paperwork? There are some signatures required to finalize the trust transfer. But my family wasn't ready to return to the relatively simple matter of my grandfather's bequest. They had discovered something much more interesting than a $2.8 million inheritance. They had discovered that their disappointing daughter was actually sitting on enough wealth to solve all of their individual financial problems, and they were already calculating how to access those resources. What they didn't realize was that this conversation was revealing something crucial about their true feelings toward me, something that would fundamentally change our family relationships forever. The inheritance money that had brought us to this law office was about to become the least significant financial issue we would discuss that day. The next 20 minutes in that conference room were a masterclass in family manipulation disguised as loving concern. What started as suggestions about strategic partnerships quickly evolved into detailed plans for how my cryptocurrency wealth should be deployed to address each family member's specific financial needs. My father pulled out his phone and began showing me spreadsheets he'd apparently been working on during our conversation. I've done some quick calculations, Seraphina, and the numbers are actually quite compelling. If you were to invest $2 million into expanding my real estate development company, we could potentially triple that investment within 18 months. The Willowbrook Heights residential market is exploding right now, he continued, his voice gaining the enthusiasm he always showed when discussing business opportunities. We have connections with the Planning Commission, relationships with contractors, and inside knowledge about which properties are coming available. Your capital combined with my expertise and established relationships could generate returns that would make your cryptocurrency gains look modest. Delphine had been taking notes on her phone and looked up with bright excitement. And Sarah, I've been thinking about the art gallery expansion that Nathaniel and I have been dreaming about for years. We could create a contemporary space that showcases emerging digital artists, maybe even incorporate NFT exhibitions. With your understanding of the digital asset space and our connections in the art world, we could position ourselves at the cutting edge of where art and technology intersect. My mother clasped her hands together as if she were already seeing these dreams become reality. Imagine what we could accomplish as a family business empire. The Ashworth name could become synonymous with innovation and success across multiple industries. Plus, my father added, there are tremendous tax advantages to family business structures. We could establish holding companies, create employment opportunities for family members, and build generational wealth that would benefit your future children and Delphine's children. I listened to them plan my financial future with a mixture of fascination and growing unease. These weren't casual suggestions anymore. They were presenting detailed business proposals with projected returns, implementation timelines, and legal structures. They had transformed from shocked family members into investment partners seeking capital, all within the span of 30 minutes. What about my current investment strategy? I asked. The cryptocurrency portfolio that got me to $15 million in the first place? My mother waved her hand dismissively. Oh, sweetheart, that was wonderful for getting started, but it's far too risky for serious wealth building. You've proven you can pick winners, but now it's time to graduate to more sophisticated investment approaches. Exactly, Delphine agreed. Cryptocurrency is like gambling, really. You've been incredibly lucky, but luck doesn't last forever. What we're talking about is sustainable business growth based on proven market demand and established relationships. My father leaned forward intensely. Seraphina, I need you to understand something important. Building wealth is only the first step. Preserving and multiplying wealth requires infrastructure, diversification, and most importantly, trusted partners who share your long-term vision. And who better to trust than family, my mother added with a warm smile. What struck me most about this conversation was how quickly they had moved from being shocked by my financial success to being convinced that they knew better than I did about how to manage that success going forward. The same people who had spent years assuming I couldn't handle basic adult responsibilities were now positioning themselves as my essential business partners and financial advisors. Mr. Blackwell stood up from his position at the far end of the conference room. "Excuse me, but I think we need to complete the inheritance documentation before we get too far into family business planning. Seraphina, these documents require your signature to officially transfer the trust assets to your personal accounts." As I reached for the pen, Delphine suddenly spoke up. "Wait, Sarah, before you sign anything, shouldn't we discuss how this inheritance fits into our overall family investment strategy?" My father nodded thoughtfully. "That's an excellent point. The inheritance could be seed capital for our first joint venture. $2.8 million would be perfect for launching the real estate expansion project without touching your cryptocurrency holdings. Or we could split it," my mother suggested. "Part for the real estate venture, part for Delphine's gallery expansion, and maybe a portion for establishing the family foundation we've always talked about creating." I set down the pen and looked around the table at my family's expectant faces. "You're suggesting that I use my inheritance from Grandpa Gus to fund your business ideas instead of keeping it for my own purposes?" "Not instead of, in addition to," Delphine corrected. "We're talking about building something much bigger than individual bank accounts. We're talking about creating a family legacy that would make Grandpa Gus incredibly proud." My father's expression grew more serious. "Seraphina, I want to be completely honest with you about something. Your mother and I have been struggling more than we've let on. The house expenses, healthcare costs, retirement planning, we're not in the secure financial position that we've tried to maintain appearances about. And Nathaniel and I are barely keeping our heads above water with the children's expenses," Delphine added quietly. "We put on a good front, but the truth is that we're one major expense away from real financial trouble." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We're not asking you to rescue us, sweetheart. We're asking you to let us help you build something magnificent together. Something that could secure all of our futures while honoring the entrepreneurial spirit that Grandpa Gus always admired." The emotional manipulation was so expertly done that I almost found myself nodding along with their proposals. They had transformed their individual financial struggles into family investment opportunities, reframed my personal wealth as family resources, and positioned themselves as essential partners in my continued success. What they didn't realize was that this conversation was about to take a turn that would expose the true nature of our family relationships in ways that none of us were prepared for. The inheritance documents sitting and signed on the conference table were about to become the least complicated part of this entire situation. The moment I realized what was actually happening hit me like a physical blow. Sitting in that conference room, listening to my family plan how to spend my money, I suddenly understood that I wasn't their daughter or sister in this conversation. I was their potential investor, their financial opportunity, their ticket to solving problems they'd been hiding behind their perfect Willowbrook Heights facade. "You know what?" I said, setting the inheritance documents aside completely. "Before we make any decisions about family business ventures or investment partnerships, I think there's something we need to discuss honestly." My father looked up expectantly, probably assuming I was about to express enthusiasm for their proposals. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "I want to understand something about our family dynamic," I began, keeping my voice steady despite the emotional storm brewing inside me. "For my entire adult life, you've treated me like I was financially irresponsible, career confused, and generally incapable of making good decisions. You've spent years making comments about my job, my lifestyle, my choices, always with this undertone of loving concern mixed with disappointment." My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Seraphina, that's not fair. We've always supported you, even when we didn't understand your choices." "Have you though?" I asked. "Because here's what I'm realizing. The moment you found out I was successful, the moment you learned I had built real wealth through my own intelligence and hard work, your attitude toward me changed completely. Suddenly I'm not the disappointing daughter anymore. Suddenly I'm someone whose judgment you respect and whose partnership you value." Delphine frowned, clearly not liking where this conversation was heading. "Sarah, that's not what's happening here. We're excited about your success because we love you and we want to celebrate your achievements. Are you celebrating my achievements, or are you calculating how those achievements can benefit you? I asked directly. The silence that followed was telling. My father cleared his throat and tried to regain control of the conversation. Seraphina, I think you're misinterpreting our enthusiasm. We're simply recognizing that you've developed skills and resources that could benefit the entire family if we work together strategically. Dad, let me ask you something, I said. If I had come to you 2 years ago and told you I had $15 million in cryptocurrency, but I was still working at Café Luna because I enjoyed it, what would your reaction have been? He hesitated, and I could see him trying to work out the right answer. Well, I suppose we would have been concerned about proper financial management and long-term planning. Exactly. You would have immediately assumed that I was being irresponsible with money, that I needed family guidance to make better decisions. But now that you need capital for your business ventures, suddenly my financial judgment is sophisticated and my investment instincts are valuable. My mother looked genuinely hurt. Sweetheart, that's not true. We've always believed in your potential. Maybe we didn't express it well, but we've always wanted you to succeed. Mom, 3 hours ago you were worried that I couldn't handle a $2 million inheritance responsibly. You were planning family interventions to protect me from making poor financial decisions. But now that you've seen my portfolio, you want me to invest millions in speculative business ventures. Delphine's carefully maintained composure was starting to crack. Sarah, you're being completely unfair. We're trying to include you in family opportunities that could benefit everyone. Isn't that what families do? Is it? I asked. Because here's what I think families do. I think they support each other's individual goals and dreams. I think they celebrate successes without immediately calculating how to profit from them. I think they respect each other's autonomy and decision-making capabilities even when they don't understand the choices being made. My father's expression hardened slightly. Seraphina, I'm starting to feel like you're attacking us for trying to help you optimize your financial position. We have decades of business experience that could prevent you from making costly mistakes. What mistakes, Dad? The mistake of building a $15 million portfolio? The mistake of living within my means while systematically growing my wealth? The mistake of maintaining my independence and pursuing a lifestyle that makes me genuinely happy? The mistake of keeping secrets from your family, my mother said quietly, and for the first time, I heard real pain in her voice. The mistake of letting us worry about your financial stability while you were secretly wealthy. The mistake of making us feel like terrible parents who had failed to provide properly for our daughter. That hit me harder than I expected. Mom, I never wanted you to feel like failures. But I kept my financial success private because I knew exactly what would happen if you found out. I knew it would stop being my success and start becoming a family asset to be managed collectively. And what's wrong with that? Delphine demanded, her voice rising slightly. What's wrong with family members helping each other? What's wrong with using your resources to elevate everyone instead of just hoarding wealth for yourself? Because it's not about helping each other, I said, finally voicing the truth that had been building inside me throughout this entire conversation. It's about you needing money and me having money. If I were still the struggling waitress you thought I was, would you be talking about family business partnerships and strategic investments? Or would you still be making subtle comments about my career choices and lifestyle decisions? The question hung in the air like a challenge. My family exchanged glances, and I could see them trying to formulate responses that would sound loving rather than opportunistic. Mr. Blackwell stepped forward diplomatically. Perhaps this would be a good time to take a brief recess. These are clearly complex family dynamics that might benefit from some private discussion time. But I wasn't finished. This conversation had revealed something fundamental about my relationships with these people, something that went far deeper than disagreements about money or business investments. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, I think we should proceed with the inheritance documentation. But before I sign anything, I want my family to understand exactly what my financial independence means to me, and why I'm not interested in the investment partnerships you proposed. What I was about to tell them would change our family relationships permanently, but at least it would be based on honesty rather than the financial manipulation that had dominated this entire meeting. I took a deep breath and looked around the conference table at my family's expectant faces. What I was about to say would either clear the air completely or destroy our relationships forever, but I couldn't continue this charade any longer. I want to tell you all something that might help you understand why I've been so protective of my financial independence, I began. But first, I need you to really listen to what I'm saying instead of planning your responses or calculating how this information might benefit your business proposals. My father nodded seriously. Of course, Seraphina. We're listening. The reason I've kept my cryptocurrency success secret isn't just because I was worried about family interference. It's because I've spent my entire life watching how this family treats people based on their perceived value and usefulness. And today's conversation has confirmed every fear I had about revealing my financial situation. My mother's face showed genuine confusion. What do you mean by that, sweetheart? Mom, think about how you've talked about me to your friends for the past 10 years. Our daughter Seraphina, she's still figuring things out. She works at a little coffee shop downtown. We're hoping she'll find her direction eventually. Compare that to how you talk about Delphine. Our daughter Delphine, who works at the prestigious gallery and has such beautiful children and married so well. Delphine shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, that's just because my life is more traditional. It's easier for them to explain to their social circle. Exactly my point, I said. My worth to this family has always been measured by how well I fit into your social expectations and how impressive I sound when you talk about me to other people. The moment you discovered I was financially successful, suddenly I became someone whose opinions matter, whose judgment you respect, whose partnership you value. My father leaned forward, clearly trying to understand. But isn't that natural? Success changes how people see you. That's just reality. Dad, let me ask you something specific. Over the past 8 years, how many times have you asked me about my interests, my goals, my plans for the future? How many times have you shown genuine curiosity about what makes me happy or what I'm passionate about? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly struggling to remember specific conversations. I can tell you exactly how many times, I continued. 0. Every conversation we've had about my future has been you expressing concern about my choices and suggesting alternatives that would be more acceptable to you. You've never once asked what I actually wanted to achieve or what success looked like from my perspective. My mother was shaking her head. That's not true, Seraphina. We've always cared about your happiness. Have you? Because here's what I think happened today. You learned that I was worth $15 million, and within 30 minutes you had transformed that information into investment opportunities that would solve your individual financial problems. You didn't ask what my plans were for that money. You didn't express curiosity about how I'd built that wealth or what I'd learned from the experience. You immediately started calculating how my success could benefit your situation. The conference room fell silent except for the sound of Mr. Blackwell quietly organizing his papers at the far end of the table. My family was staring at me with expressions that ranged from shock to hurt to defensive anger. Furthermore, I continued, the business partnerships you proposed aren't actually partnerships at all. You want me to provide capital while you provide expertise and connections. But where in these proposals is recognition of my proven ability to generate returns? Where is acknowledgement that I might have valuable insights about investment strategy or business development? Delphine's voice was quiet when she finally spoke. Sarah, are you saying you don't trust us to be fair business partners? I'm saying that you've spent years treating me like someone who couldn't be trusted with important decisions, and now you want me to trust you with millions of dollars of my money. I'm saying that your respect for my judgment seems to be directly proportional to how much my resources can solve your problems. My father's expression hardened. Seraphina, I think you're being unfair and frankly quite hurtful. We're your family. Everything we've suggested has been motivated by love and concern for your well-being. Dad, if you discovered tomorrow that I had lost all my money and was genuinely struggling financially, would you still be interested in family business partnerships? Would you still value my investment insights and financial sophistication? The question hung in the air unanswered, and that silence was more revealing than any words could have been. Here's what I've realized today, I said, feeling a strange sense of liberation as I finally voiced thoughts I'd been carrying for years. My value to this family has always been conditional. When I was the disappointing daughter working at a coffee shop, I was someone who needed guidance and management. Now that I'm the successful daughter with millions in assets, I'm someone whose partnership you want to secure. But what you've never done, I continued, is simply accept me as I am, respect my choices even when you don't understand them, and trust my judgment even when my decisions don't align with your expectations. My mother was crying quietly now, and the sight of her tears made my chest tight with guilt and sadness. But I couldn't stop. This conversation had been building inside me for decades. So here's what's going to happen, I said, reaching for the inheritance documents. I'm going to sign these papers and accept Grandpa Gus's gift exactly as he intended. I'm going to continue managing my own financial portfolio exactly as I have been. And I'm going to politely decline your business partnership proposals, not because I don't love you, but because I finally understand the difference between conditional love and unconditional respect. What happened next would determine whether our family relationships could survive this level of honesty, or whether my financial independence would cost me the only family I'd ever known. The explosion that followed my declaration was unlike anything I had ever witnessed in our family's carefully controlled emotional landscape. For 32 years, the Ashworths had maintained their conflicts through passive aggression, subtle manipulation, and polite disappointment. What happened next shattered that facade completely. My father stood up so abruptly that his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. His face had turned a deep shade of red that I'd never seen before, and when he spoke, his voice carried a level of raw anger that made me instinctively lean back in my seat. "How dare you," he said, his words clipped and precise despite his obvious fury. "How dare you sit there and psychoanalyze this family like we're some kind of dysfunctional case study? We have loved you, supported you, and worried about you for your entire life, and this is how you repay that love? By accusing us of being opportunistic and manipulative?" My mother was no longer crying quietly. She was sobbing openly, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks in dark streaks. "Seraphina, how can you say such horrible things about us? We're your family. We've always wanted what's best for you, even when we didn't understand your choices. What's best for me, or what's most convenient for you?" I shot back, surprised by my own boldness. Because from where I'm sitting, your definition of what's best has always aligned perfectly with what would make you look good to your friends at the country club. Delphine had gone completely white, her composure finally cracking entirely. When she spoke, her voice was shaking with what sounded like a mixture of hurt and rage. "You selfish, ungrateful bitch. Do you have any idea what it's been like being your sister? Do you know how exhausting it is to constantly defend you to people who ask why you're wasting your life?" The word bitch hung in the air like a slap. In 32 years, I had never heard Delphine use that kind of language, especially not directed at me. Her perfect facade had finally cracked, revealing something ugly underneath. "Defend me?" I asked incredulously. "Or defend yourself for having a sister who embarrasses you?" "Both," she screamed, standing up and pacing to the window. "Both, okay? Yes, it's embarrassing to have a sister who works as a waitress when all my friends' sisters are doctors and lawyers and successful businesswomen. Yes, it's awkward when people ask what you do and I have to make excuses about how you're finding yourself or pursuing your passion, when everyone knows those are just nice ways of saying you're a failure." My father pointed his finger at me accusingly. "And now we find out that while we've been making excuses for you, while we've been worrying about your future and trying to help you build a stable life, you've been sitting on millions of dollars and laughing at us behind our backs." "I was never laughing at you," I said quietly, but my voice was lost in the chaos of their simultaneous outbursts. My mother looked up from her hands, her mascara-streaked face twisted with something that looked like betrayal. "Do you know what the worst part is, Seraphina? The worst part is that you let us feel guilty. You let us think we had failed as parents because our daughter wasn't successful. You watched us stress about your future, worry about your stability, make sacrifices to help support you, all while you were secretly wealthier than any of us." "What sacrifices?" I demanded. "When did you ever sacrifice anything for me?" "The monthly checks," Delphine said, turning from the window with tears streaming down her face. The $1,000 that Mom and Dad have been sending you every month for the past 3 years because they thought you were struggling. The money they took from their retirement savings because they were worried about their daughter who couldn't afford to live independently. My stomach dropped. What monthly checks? My father's expression shifted from anger to something that looked almost like vindictive satisfaction. Oh, you didn't know about those? Your mother insisted on setting up automatic transfers to your account because she was worried about you not having enough money for groceries and rent. We've been sending you $12,000 a year out of our retirement fund. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened my banking app. Sure enough, there they were, monthly deposits of $1,000 from Theodore and Cordelia Ashworth, going back 3 years. $36,000 that I had never noticed because my cryptocurrency gains were so substantial that $1,000 a month didn't even register as significant. I never asked for that money, I said weakly. I never even knew you were sending it. Of course you didn't know, my mother said bitterly. Because you were too busy managing your secret fortune to pay attention to your own bank account. Do you know what we've given up to send you that money? Vacations, home improvements, retirement contributions. We've been living on a tight budget for 3 years because we thought our daughter needed help. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. While I had been building my cryptocurrency empire and feeling proud of my financial independence, my parents had been quietly sacrificing their own financial security to support what they believed was their struggling daughter. But that's exactly my point, I said desperately. You never asked if I needed the money. You never discussed it with me. You just assumed I was struggling and decided to manage that situation without my input, the same way you're trying to manage my inheritance and investment decisions now. Because that's what parents do, my father shouted. We take care of our children when they need help, even when they're too proud or stubborn to ask for it. Mr. Blackwell stood up from his position at the far end of the conference room. I think perhaps we should take a break and allow everyone to process these revelations. This is clearly a very emotional situation that might benefit from some cooling off time. But none of us were interested in cooling off. 32 years of family dysfunction had just exploded into the open, and there was no putting that genie back in the bottle. Delphine turned to face me directly, her voice deadly quiet. So what happens now, Sarah? Do you just walk away from us completely? Do you take your millions and disappear so you don't have to deal with your embarrassing family anymore? The question hung in the air, and I realized that everything I said next would determine whether our family relationships could survive this revelation or whether my financial independence would cost me the only family I'd ever known. But before I could answer, my father made a decision that would change everything forever. My father walked over to where I was sitting, reached across the table, and grabbed the inheritance documents before I could stop him. In one swift motion, he tore the papers in half, then in half again, scattering the pieces across the mahogany conference table like confetti. There, he said, his voice cold and final. Problem solved. If you want to be financially independent, if you want to reject family support and partnership, then you can be completely independent. You don't get to have it both ways, Seraphina. You don't get to hoard millions while accepting inheritance money that should benefit the entire family. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Blackwell stared at the torn documents in horror, clearly struggling to process what had just happened. My mother had stopped crying and was looking at my father with something that might have been admiration or shock. Delphine was smiling for the first time since we'd entered this conference room. Theodore, Mr. Blackwell said carefully, I need to inform you that destroying those documents doesn't actually invalidate the inheritance. Augustus's will is legally binding regardless of whether these particular papers are intact. I have copies in my files, and the trust transfer can proceed with replacement documentation. But my father wasn't listening to legal technicalities. He was staring at me with an expression of cold determination that I'd never seen before. Here's what's going to happen, Seraphina. If you want to play the role of the ungrateful daughter who thinks her family is beneath her, then you can live with the consequences of that choice. What consequences? I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. You're no longer welcome in our home, he said simply. You're no longer invited to family dinners, holiday celebrations, or any other family gatherings. If you want to be independent, then be independent completely. My mother nodded in agreement, her tears having dried into something harder and more resolute. We've spent years trying to help and support you, and apparently we've been wasting our time. If you think we're such terrible people, if you think our love is so conditional, then you can see how you feel about life without it. Delphine crossed her arms and looked at me with undisguised satisfaction. And don't expect any relationship with Beatrice and Edmund. I'm not exposing my children to someone who has such a toxic attitude toward family loyalty. I sat there processing what was happening, feeling like I was watching my family disappear in real time. In the span of 30 minutes, I had gone from being their disappointing but beloved daughter to being completely exiled from their lives. So that's it? I asked quietly. Because I won't give you access to my money, because I won't let you manage my inheritance, I'm cut off from the family entirely? No, my father said, his voice carrying that paternal authority that had shaped my childhood. Because you've made it clear that you have nothing but contempt for this family, because you've accused us of being manipulative and opportunistic, because you've rejected every gesture of love and support we've tried to offer, you've chosen to separate yourself from us. The gaslighting was so complete and expertly executed that for a moment I almost believed them. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe their business proposals really had been motivated by love rather than opportunism. Maybe I was the problem after all. But then I looked at the torn inheritance documents scattered across the table, and I remembered my father's immediate instinct to destroy something that belonged to me when I refused to share it with him. I thought about the monthly checks they'd been sending without my knowledge or consent, and how they were now using those unwanted gifts as evidence of my ingratitude. You know what? I said, standing up and gathering my purse. You're absolutely right. I should be independent completely. I walked over to Mr. Blackwell and shook his hand. Thank you for your time today. Please proceed with the inheritance transfer using replacement documents. And please send all future correspondence directly to me rather than involving my family. Then I turned back to face my parents and sister one last time. For what it's worth, I do love you. I've always loved you. But I'm finally understanding that love and respect are two different things, and I deserve both. My mother made one last attempt at emotional manipulation. Seraphina, please don't leave like this. We can work through these issues if you're willing to compromise. Compromise how? I asked. By giving you access to my money? By pretending that your business proposals weren't attempts to solve your own financial problems with my resources? By continuing to accept your support and guidance when I'm actually more financially successful than any of you? When none of them answered, I headed toward the door. Goodbye, I said simply. Walking out of that conference room felt like emerging from underwater after holding my breath for 32 years. The revelation about my family's true priorities hurt more than I had expected, but it also brought a clarity that I'd never experienced before. 6 months later, I'm writing this story from my new apartment in downtown Detroit, a beautiful loft space that I purchased with cash. I've continued growing my cryptocurrency portfolio, which is now worth over $18 million. I've also started a financial literacy nonprofit that teaches young people about digital asset investing and wealth building. My family has maintained their silence completely. No phone calls, no text messages, no attempts at reconciliation. According to mutual friends, they've been telling people that I had a psychological breakdown and cut them off for no reason. Delphine has apparently started her own story about how she tried to help her mentally unstable sister manage a large inheritance, but I became paranoid and accused them all of trying to steal from me. The inheritance money from Grandpa Gus sits in a separate investment account, growing steadily through conservative mutual fund investments. I think he would be proud of how I handled the situation, even though it cost me my relationship with his son and granddaughter. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Sometimes I miss the idea of family dinners and holiday celebrations, even if the reality was always more complicated than the fantasy. But then I remember my father tearing up those inheritance documents when I refused to share them, and I know I made the only choice that preserved my integrity and self-respect. Financial independence, it turns out, isn't just about having enough money to support yourself. It's about having the freedom to walk away from relationships that require you to diminish yourself in order to maintain them. And for the first time in my life, I'm completely, authentically, unapologetically free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.